I'm Ross, Twitter, Teacher Toolkit, teaching 27 years, been blogging for about 12. I just want to share what I've learned about memory. I think if I'd learned this 27 years ago when I started training as a teacher, I would have probably been a much better teacher. And I think I would have helped my my pupils learn better also. So I want to start off with just kind of slow introduction. I'm just going to refer to the chat box. I think you've all put a B, pretty much beginners. So if you haven't put that in, just type in a B for beginner, I for intermediate, or A for advanced. I'm going to assume you're not advanced, otherwise you won't be doing this. So just start off with some of the issues. So these things I've researched myself in my book, Just Great Teaching, and then looking at other sources. So I'll start with one, just kind of getting into the basics of memory. Our brains are not computers. We don't store stuff and retrieve it on demand. So I'm going to do an example shortly. Two, I think if we learn this and become masters at learning memory and then techniques, I think we can let our kids access curriculum better. And I think teaching's always been about what, why, and how. And I think it's more so moving towards the why. And then, and not just the kind of, if you think of Ofsted, if you're watching from England, the intent, implementation, impact. It's more about kind of getting kids to understand knowledge. And also I don't know, in the chat box, can you tell me if you've ever had any training whatsoever in your schools or your teacher training, a yes or a no in the chat box, if you've ever had any training on memory. Mine is only from people at Keynotes. Okay, so Emily, you have, okay, some people have, okay, so it's about a 50-50 split. Okay, so I'm going to get you to do a task. I want you to have a little post-it and a pen to hand, so I'll give you 30 seconds to just grab some paper and a pen. So for Delia, watching in Spain, I'm going to vary your task slightly, a little bit of differentiation here. I want you all, without cheating, to draw me the front side of a 10p coin from memory. And if you're watching Delia from Spain, can you draw me the front side of a €1 coin? Okay. Give you 30 seconds. Try and draw a doodle. I'm not looking for anything incredible. And then if you're happy to stick your camera on, then just stick your little doodle up to the screen. So we're talking about memory here. So stick your sketch up right close, a bit closer, Emma. Okay. Okay, thank you, Anthony. Okay, Kirsty. Okay, great. And PMCCA, you need to remind me your name. Paul, okay, stick it up. Okay, a little bit lower. Okay, great. I think that's everyone. Okay, Delia, I haven't got your camera on, so I'm going to assume you've done it. So on this link here, it's just a link to a 10p coin. So we'll stick up a euro as well. So we know what a 10p coin is, but because we're retrieving it from our memory, it's not very good. So here you've got your queen. Okay, if we just stick on a €1 coin for the benefit of Delia, there we go. We've got the European map and the 1. Okay, so it's a simple task, and we'll talk about retrieval later. So just why is it important? There's lots of definitions out there at the moment, but it says change in long-term memory, essentially 1 and 2. And teachers, number 3, have to manage our instruction so that we can maximize children's particularly memory potential. And 4 and 5, when we do this, we are better teachers, kids are better learners. And you could argue that if we know this, and this is why I want to share it, I suppose, is it's a social justice issue. Kids don't sometimes have that capacity. We talk about cultural capital, who's cultural capital, all that type of stuff. And then if you think of all of us in our life where we've been given opportunities, the more opportunities, for whatever reason, that kind of theory is called the Matthew effect. I profit from knowing more stuff or more experiences. So if I keep it simple, here's a 30-second definition. So imagine your memory is like a wardrobe, and it's either tidy or it's not tidy. Okay, and that's the best definition I can get you from this book I've been reading. So we take that a little bit further. It's a good metaphor to remember about memory, and I'll talk about reconstructive shortly, but it needs to be tidy. So you need to recall. So you look at these two graphics at the bottom. We need to tidy stuff, and that's essentially the recall retrieval process. If I hang up a shirt and know where it is, I can recall it easier. So I'm going to bring your microphones on, just ask if anyone's got any initial comments. Let me just work out how to do that. And what I will also ask is, what do you know about this graphic here? So let's have a look. Let's unmute you all. Hello everyone, good evening. You there?
Hello.
Thank you. So this is a simple graphic. You've got your memory, then you've got your red, green, yellow zone, I guess. Red is new knowledge. Short term, it's more stressful. Working memory could easily be a red zone. I challenge new content. Long term, it's secure, and I know how to. So my easiest examples, I know this is a pen. I know how to use it. And on this side, this is often unconscious, and we have to make it conscious. And then when I start to say, for example, draw the front coin of a 10p coin, you know what it looks like, but it's stressful and it's working memory. And unless you practice and develop a bank of concepts, rules, and facts, it starts to get under stress. So you can essentially have all these knowledges of facts or 10p coins or pens. It's all there waiting to be used. When you access your long-term memory, you have to work out methods to produce action. Okay, so does anyone have initial questions? I think that's just a simple introduction. I'm going to take you through each area in a bit more depth. We've got 40 minutes together. Any initial questions? Don't be shy. Everyone's always shy in webinars, so don't.
No, not from me.
Okay, thank you. Okay, let's take it further. So let's talk about short-term memory in a little bit more detail. Here's a 30-second intro. If a student is listening, does not guarantee they have learned anything. If information doesn't get processed, it's lost. So they have to process new information. Okay, so here's a good piece of research at the top. And I'm then going to do a little demo with you. So short-term memory is capable of holding small amounts of information, roughly 15 to 13 seconds worth. And working memory, researchers often cite between 4 to 8 pieces of information and how much you can hold it. So I'm going to give you a string of numbers. It's my phone number. You can't write it down. I just want you to try and remember it through recital and see if you can just call me on it. And I want to see whose short-term memory is the best. Okay, so here we go. Don't write it down, just recall. Here's the number, 10 numbers. Oh, I've got Alexa calling.
I feel like there's someone behind my curtain.
Oh, hold on a minute. Sorry, I got my I got my wife to come up. Okay, here's the number. 07931 640 943. As soon as you think you've got it, give us a call. I'll do it one more time. I'm going to wait for my phone to ring here. I got it behind me. 07931 640 943. I suspect people watching this historically will start calling me as well. Any takers?
I don't want to ring it in case I ring some random person.
Yeah, it's not a random number. Okay. So short-term memory, you've just learnt my number, or you've just heard it at least, and I'm exploring your working memory, so it's challenging. So what we could do is loads of different techniques to get this number. So it's in my long-term memory. There's a reason why I know my number. Some of you, do you all know your mobile number or not?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anybody not? Okay, because my wife doesn't know her number, and I will say, you know, what if you lost your phone and you had to call me? It could be an emergency. Working memory. This is when you hold some information in your short term, so that my number, and then have to manipulate it. So I would maybe struggle to say my mobile phone number backwards. I've never practiced it backwards. So then you can only hold so much information. So here's another example. I'm going to give you, I'm just going to delete those so you can't see. I'm going to give you another number. I'm going to give you my birth date. You can't write it down again, but I'd like you to recite the numbers when I ask you on the screen. Okay, so I'm going to give you my birthday, and I want you to recall the number and say it out aloud when I say your name. So here we go. 2511, Paul.
2511.
Okay. 25117, Emma.
25117.
Okay. 2511731, Jenny.
2511731.
Okay. 2511731 Delia.
Oh, I've lost it now.
Okay. 2511731505, Delia.
No, it's gone.
Okay. 2511731505, Anthony.
271173.
No, you got the second number wrong. So I'm not expecting you all to remember my date of birth and time of day I was born, but it's in my long-term memory. If I ask for your date of birth, Emma, what is it?
030573.
Okay. Do you have a timestamp at all?
No.
Okay. So most people can recall their date of birth, but if I said, Emma, can you say your date of birth backwards in a string of numbers? Could you do that?
375030.
Okay, so, and it's not something you would normally practice, but you can start to see how we experience emotions and stress in our working memory. And when I ask Delia or Anthony to recall the 10 numbers, it starts to become difficult to recall, especially if it's short-term information. So I'm going to give you some numbers that you do know, but I'm going to give you them in a way that you didn't learn at school. Okay, so I'm going to give you some numbers that you know, but you didn't learn these at school in this particular way. So here are the numbers. 191, Delia.
191.
Okay. 19141, Jenny.
19141.
191419181, Anthony.
191419181.
Correct. 1914191819391. Emily.
191419181. I don't know.
Okay, let's go again. 1914191819391. Kirsty.
191419181931.
Okay, excellent. So the whole number 191419181939195. I'm essentially telling you the World War dates. You learnt them in a chunking fashion, 1914 to 1918, 1939 to 1945. But when I say them in a string, because you didn't learn them in this way, you can't recall them. Okay, so essentially in the slide notes when I send you them, that's just those demos I've left there. You could use pi 3.142, you could use the alphabet A, B, C, D. But if I said say the alphabet backwards, unless you practice that alphabet backwards, you can't recall it in that way. So that's where we're kind of getting to now, short-term, working term, and bridging sometimes with knowledge of long-term memory. Okay, so here's another demo. On a bit of paper, could you just sketch this grid 7 by 7 squares? Quick little doodle. 7 by 7.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Okay, so I'm going to show you an image. Don't want you to cheat. I just want you to stare at the image. I'll give you 30 seconds, and I want you to remember as many letters as possible, so that when I hide the grid, you're going to write the letters in the grid. Okay, so stare at the grid. Here we go. Okay, just see how many you can get on a bit of paper. Got my cat trying to get in the door. Okay, when you've got some answers, hold your piece of paper up to the screen. A bit lower, Paul, a bit closer. Okay, great. Not bad. Emma? Okay, thank you. Kirsty? Okay, great. Let's see, Anthony, thank you. Okay. So what you've all been doing is something called chunking. Because you've seen a random set of letters, most of you will have spotted Eileen at the top, for example. You start to make kind of chunking processes to remember random words. So how it's explained here, you make meaningful words from random letters. So Eileen is that example that goes across the top. So there, we've got it there. And you start to see patterns. So you might look at all the O's, for example, or the D's, and start to sequence them in patterns. So there's a great book stroke blogs from the emotional learner. So it's Mark Smith, he's a psychologist. He talks about what's called chunking as a process for recalling information. So it's all on this blog here. And he's got this great book called Psychology in the Classroom. Mark's also on Twitter. Okay, let's go into long-term memory now. So here's a 30-second definition. Relies on what is in long-term memory in order to process information. It's a dialogue between two storage units. So your working memory has to rely on what you've got in your long-term memory when I ask you a question. So, for example, Anthony, can you say the first 6 letters of the English alphabet?
A, B, C, D, E, F.
That's 5. I said 6.
Oh,
Okay.
yeah.
There's a good little example there about being clear. So I'm going to come back to instructions later in teachers being clear and precise. So let's just take it a little bit further. When information is stored, so your alphabet A to Z is in a schematic map. Okay. And then you've got a mental model. So you may have mnemonics, or I'm sure most of you learn, I learned the alphabet as A, B, C, D, E, F, things like you learn through nursery rhymes or a different rhyme. If I said turkey, what's the first thing you would think of, Jenny?
Christmas.
Okay. Emily, what about you?
I'd say Christmas as well.
Okay. Emma?
Yeah, same.
Okay, so it's interesting people don't think of the country, for example. Or if we do come to Turkey, the food, if you're in America, you'll think of Thanksgiving at Easter. If you're in Britain, you'll think of Turkey for Christmas. So your own schematic map of Turkey, whether it's the country or the food, will be different. If I say Twin Towers, you will think, Kirsty, what?
9/11.
9/11, okay. So everyone's got a trigger for different words. And when we think of how kids learn, if they're looking at letters on a page, when they first learn to read, it's just squiggles. But after they learn the art of decoding and phonics, these letters become words, and then they construct words into sentences, for example. So here's a little graphic. Your environment matters, you know, whether it's at home or in school, and you've got all your sensory environments, how you learn. You're not going to learn in a, you know, now I'm getting more into memory. I find it very difficult to concentrate on the television if other people are talking, for example, in the room, or if you're in a busy classroom and there's 30 people having low-level conversations, or if you've got autism or ADHD, you start to hear background noises. All these things matter. The key thing is, I go back to Anthony's example, I said, say the first 6 letters, so I'm dual coding, I'm giving you a signal, say the first 6 letters of the English alphabet. And then we start to consider how students pay attention, how they pay attention also matters, because their working memory will be very different. You've got to imagine memory as buckets, and everyone's got a different shaped bucket, and what we ask gets loaded depending on our capacity. Once we get past all this area, how we transfer knowledge into long-term memory are the teaching techniques that we'll use. So the A, B, C, D, write it down, say it out aloud, test you in a week's time, test you in a month's time, those types of processes. And then once it's starting to become stored, what we do back in class is we ask quiz questions. We ask kids, right, tell me the first 5 letters, A, B, C. I write out 26 letters, I hide all the vowels, I ask kids what letters are missing, for example. So that regular quizzing supports long-term retention and helps deal with that stress when we're asked questions in classroom or for an exam. Has anyone got any questions so far?
No.
Okay, so that's short-term, working, and long-term. So we're going to take it a little bit further and go into types of memory. So what I've got here is, we've talked about short, working, long-term, but I want to just go into long-term in a bit more detail. On the right side, you've got what's implicit. So that's your subconscious. So your alphabet or the 10-pence coin is in your subconscious memory. You know it, but you don't often retrieve it. So what you've also got is, inside implicit, you've got procedural knowledge. So for an example, you know how to ride a bike. You can do it without thinking. Then you've got priming, which is often, if I'm going to give you an example. I've got an image of a doctor there, so I'm going to come back to that one. Other than your subconscious knowledge, you've got explicit knowledge. So things that are what's called episodic memory and semantic memory. So if I think of Twin Towers, Kirsty said, 9/11 New York, that's semantic. Okay, I often think of episodic as episodes, and if you look at the birthday cake, it's often episodes in our personal life. Semantic knowledge is knowledge and facts about New York, for example. What do you know about New York? Now, if you've never been to New York, you can only rely on what you've read on Wikipedia, things you've seen in the news, whether it's real news or fake news, or what your friends have said through their photographs when they visited, and that, or what you've been taught from your textbooks or in lessons. So episodic, emotional, personal, semantic, knowledge and facts. And that's the conscious. Now in the explicit and implicit, I've got on the box on the left here, I know that's a pen. The implicit is I know how to use it, it's in my subconsciousness. Okay, and that's just one example of describing this. And this is, explicit is knowledge, implicit is perhaps the skill. I know how to ride a bike or use the pen. And often when you think of the knowledge and skills argument, sometimes you might see on social media, it's skills is a knowledge. And that could be critical thinking, it could be problem solving, or many other types of those kind of critical skills. Okay, so let's take it a little bit further. Semantic memory. Okay, so I often get confused. I sometimes connotate semantic with romantic. That's not right. Episodic is the romantic. It's your personal things such as weddings, birthdays, when you broke your leg, things that you remember. So semantic memory is knowledge and facts about New York, and they can be recalled without you having to recall the experience. So if you've been to New York, for example. These memories are conscious, and you can describe them, and that becomes the kind of core part of your knowledge. So if you think back to your classrooms, if you're teaching kids photosynthesis, they'll know that the plant life cycle, the sun, the water, that type of stuff. Episodic memory are personal events. Now, the easiest way I can describe this is if you think of it like a movie, you're the star of the show. The problem is, although it's not necessarily academic, it's not reliable either, because you'll choose, whether through stress or bias, what you want to remember about your. So if I ask Kirsty, are you married, as an example?
No.
Okay. Can you think of a relative's wedding that you've attended?
Yes.
Okay. Was it a great wedding or an awful wedding?
It was amazing.
Okay. So straight away here, now we're getting into bias. It's going to be amazing because most weddings generally are. And if they're our family, they're going to be extra special because we're emotionally involved. Okay. And I would imagine you'll have certain memories about that wedding, but some of it may be vague, whether it's through historical reasons or alcoholic reasons. Okay.
Yeah.
So that's just an example of episodic, personal events and bias. Okay. Compared to, Kirsty, have you been to New York?
Yes, I have.
Okay. So can you give me any fact you know about New York, putting you on the spot? This is your working memory.
Oh, gosh.
Not a fact about New York.
The taxis are yellow.
Yes. Okay, great. One thing I remember is I might be getting, in fact, I can't rely on this because I think I'm getting confused with Hong Kong. I think they charge per airspace how tall your building is as a tax, I think. And that's, you see, I'm getting into dangerous territory here where I'm relying on my memory. On this slide, you'll see there's me at the top of the Twin Towers in 1996. So I've been there. I know it. I can't remember which tower it was, whether it was north or the south. If I come into semantic and episodic, semantic, I know about New York, but again, my memory is reliable. I can't remember if you're taxed per how your building is, or if it's in Singapore, Hong Kong, where I heard that. I can recall basic facts, Statue of Liberty, taxis are yellow, River Hudson, those types of things. But episodic, 1996, 2011, I remember the Twin Towers collapsing, but my memory's fading about those episodes. And also I've got my bias, and my memory will fade because of the events. So here's a really good quote. Children benefit from experience, concrete examples. So episodic, experience prior to learning. So if you ever need to convince your school leader to take kids on a trip or to the theatre or go camping for a field trip, here's your research. You want kids to do better at their exams and coursework. This shows you that drama and everything else that kids do, those experiences come back to the theory in the classroom. So there's a great bit of research, a great quote, and that comes from Trish Taylor's book. Okay, and I'm going to tweet the hell out of that at some point later. Okay.
So you know when it says, can I ask a question?
Yes, of course.
So you know when it says, the quote says, prior to learning more abstract concepts. So let's say you were teaching an inspector calls, for example, in English. Would it be best to go and see the play first before actually teaching the text?
Well, that's what, I mean, I took the quote out, but it's probably best reading the quote. I mean, her references here at the back are about 4 or 5 pages. But that's what it's suggesting.
Okay.
You know, it's not saying you must get them to the theatre before they read the text. But at least they would benefit from seeing the text, whether it was on a video because you can't get on the trip, or go to the actual theatre and watch it yourself.
Yeah, okay.
But my take on this is they would benefit better from doing it first, the practice, rather than the theory. So rather than us talk about a bike, let's see if we can ride it and then we'll talk about it.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, so come back to implicit memory, subconscious. Here's a picture of a father and son. They're driving down the motorway. They're both hurt in an accident and they're both badly hurt, and they're both taken to separate hospitals. When the boy is taken in for an operation, the surgeon says, "I cannot do this surgery because it's my son."
No.
So how is that possible, anyone?
Well, I've heard this before, so I know why it's possible, but I remember
okay.
the first time.
All right, don't say anything, Jenny. I'll ask anyone else. It's a good little one here. Anyone else? How's it possible? I cannot do this surgery because this is my son.
It's 21 hours.
It just isn't. They don't have the accents at the same time.
Okay.
Isn't it the adult, the male adult, is the driving instructor?
Sorry?
Isn't the male, the elder adult, the male, isn't he a driving instructor?
So we can have all speculations. Essentially what we're getting into here, you can have all sorts of scenarios, but essentially the boy has two dads. And often we may assume, or the surgeon may be, you know, we can have female surgeons, not just male surgeons, all that type of stuff. So we're going into our bias here about what our perception is of a doctor. So hence why I've got the little picture of a doctor on here. This is called priming knowledge. And that's sometimes, it's a mixture of bias, unconscious bias, or I'm a design and technology teacher, so I think of priming as in paint, the undercoat before the knot. And so it might be 1 + 1 = Anthony?
2.
2. So again, I'm going into your knowledge, subconscious, and I've primed you 1 + 1 =, I get the response. So it's like an undercoat. That's my DT analogy. So if an image of a man, not a woman, comes to your mind, this is called priming knowledge. It's a form of implicit unconscious memory based on past experiences or unconscious bias, where it's resistant to change. So the son could have had two lads, for example. It's a bit like riding a bike. You know how to do it, but it's hard to explain it. The examples I may have is if you can drive a car, and I know we're not driving to work at the moment, or some of you might be, but when you take your first driving lesson, you're very conscious, and the driving instructor's saying foot down, mirror signal maneuver. So it becomes subconscious over time because you do it thousands of times. But if I said to you, when you drive to work next, could you say out aloud each instruction, your driving may get worse and it may put you off. But what it does is it also improves your performance. So if you think of Usain Bolt or Beyonce, or, you know, if they're looking at the performance on a stage or on a track, they go down to minute details and video how they take off from the blocks, how they dip for the line, how they do a kind of repertoire on the stage with dancers, because they look at it in micro detail. I know it's not in the classroom, but it's another way of looking at performance also. So poor working memory, a 30-second definition. I say to kids, I want everyone to get out their books, turn to page 4 and read the first paragraph, then answer the first 3 questions at the bottom. So students will have poor working memory, they'll lose track or appear confused. So some examples will be, Miss, what did you say? Can't follow the instructions, or they give up. So that's a sign of poor working memory. And there'll be a gazillion different reasons. Autism, ADHD, I've had a really bad lesson with Mr. McGill next door, I didn't sleep very well last night, etc., etc. And the challenge for us all was, with 30 kids in front of us, how do we balance all this? So it's really critical that if we understand memory, we then understand how better to give instructions and use techniques. So I'll come to that to finish. It's cognitive load theory. In 30 seconds, think of yourself now you've had this training, as a cognitive coach, and think of the mind as a bucket, and it's limited and it can only take so much, or it gets overloaded. So there are 3 definitions. Look at number 5 on here. This is from Sweller in 1998, and this is largely shaping the English profession at the moment. You've got intrinsic theory or load theory, extraneous, and germane. Intrinsic is the material itself, so the worksheet or what I asked you to do. How I present it is extraneous load. So if I say too much, like I'm doing exactly now, so I apologize for that. Or germane is how I give schematic plans, so curriculum plans, teaching techniques, retrieval practice, to allow you to build up a schematic map. So when I put Kirsty on the spot and asked her about New York, she was first under stress, ooh, and then she came up with the yellow taxi example. But if I built that into our curriculum and we regularly looked at images, text, videos in New York, we went to visit on a field trip, I could build up a schematic map. So when I asked her, give me some facts about New York, it's less stressful. So what you also have to consider is content in your teaching that's relevant. necessary for learning, repetitive thinking. So that's that germane kind of schematic plans, and things that you can use again in your techniques. And there's a great term called desirable difficulties. You want to build into your schemes of work things that are desirable but difficult, which challenge kids' memory, working memory, especially if they're getting new content short term, or you're asking them to retrieve from the long term. So you're constantly in working memory, in my opinion. Okay, so you want to create desirable moments in your lesson where, right, kids, it's a bit like doing a quiz at the end and the scoring points, and you ask the really hard question and someone wins 50 points or a chocolate bar. It becomes a desirable task to do. The irrelevant stuff is too much information, so I'm doing this all now, so I apologise. How I present it, so too much text on the screen, too much talking, tons of instructions, step 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then your cognitive load gets overflown. Okay? Now, when we get into revision season, I know it's different this year, which is a first for my lifetime, probably for yours, with all exams being cancelled, but kids have what's called the illusion of knowing. I know it, miss. I know it. I've been revising. And what happens is, kids think because they've studied lots, not necessarily using effective techniques, they get confused with effort versus their performance. So they think they've learned something by cramming it in, for example. So I remember when I was a teenager, I would study the night before for an exam and cram it all in rather than doing it at regular intervals over a longer period of time. And I think much of that has been quashed, and we're better at that as teachers, but still perhaps many of our kids still think cramming or highlighting revision notes are the best way to learn. And hopefully more of our schools are teaching our kids metacognition and how best to learn and revise. And I think that would be something that I would advocate as a good practice today. Anyone got any questions? So I'm going to finish. I'm just going to skim past 5 more minutes, just skimming past teaching ideas. You'll know some of these. I've done other webinars and all these are on my site. Are we all familiar with dual coding or not? Yes or no?
Yeah.
No.
Okay.
No,
Dual
no.
coding, essentially, Anthony, I give you words and text.
Yeah.
But
Okay.
I chunk it in certain ways. So if I give it too much, there's something called redundancy effect. So if I say bears enjoy eating honey, it's text and there's images on the screen or whiteboard, your working memory is too much. What I should do is just present you with the images or the text and get you to say it. So an example would be in my resources. I show you this. Anthony, what do bears like doing?
Eating honey.
Okay, and then I could have the text instead, and I could ask you to say it out aloud. So it's just considering dual coding words and pictures. It's not learning styles. It's just accessing information. Are we all familiar with retrieval practice? Yeses or no's?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So retrieval, your quizzes, your flashcards, your thumbs up, your thumbs down, your mini whiteboards. The best resource I love and I always share is this one. It's a great little lesson plan map. It's a great curriculum plan tool. If you build this into your lessons 2 or 3 minutes every time, and you quiz kids on what you taught them last month, last week, last lesson, and then today I ask a question, what do bears like doing? Can you draw the 10-pence coin? I'll give you 5 minutes. And if I laminate this on A3 paper and give kids a board pen, I can reuse this on their desks time and time again. I'm not a primary expert, but I would imagine you could still use this in a primary classroom to at least year 4, maybe year 3 at a push. Is there any primary teachers on the channel?
Yeah.
Do you think you could use this in a young Key Stage 1, Anthony?
Probably not Key Stage 1. Key Stage 2, yes, for certain. Yeah, you could, yeah.
Great. I mean, maybe not the resource, but certainly I could ask kids in Key Stage 1 last month, kids, do we remember, let's just practice this nursery rhyme or whatever it would be. Last week we did X, give them a visual cue. Last lesson or yesterday we did Y. Hands up who remembers ABC, perhaps. I mean, I'm no specialist there, but I wonder if that could be done in that way. Redundancy effect, a bit like this where I've showed you too much information. I've shown this one in another couple of webinars, so 1 or 2 of you might have seen this, but can I ask you all to just read that sentence? If you've seen it before, if you could just hold back the answer. I just want you to read the sentence to yourself. Okay,
I know,
and now,
I still can't find them.
sorry, Emma?
I know it and I still can't find
Oh,
them.
okay. So my question this time is, how many letter Fs do you see in this sentence? So if you know it, don't shout out if you've seen it before, but if you don't, Anthony, how many letter Fs?
2.
Okay, Delia?
3.
Emily?
3.
Jenny?
3.
Okay, there are 6.
Oh.
Okay, so a bit of literacy. Fox is a Finnish sound, of is a OV sound, and plus finished files, years, results, scientific study, they're command words. Of is not an important word, and we've got 3 of them here, one here, one here, one there. Our brain tells us it's not important. When I ask you a question under pressure, like I would in the classroom, if I present too much material, I go into cognitive load theory and I ask you a question like, you know, whether we need to know how many Fs is another matter, but in this case, you get the answer wrong. So you can see, even us as qualified teachers with degrees and all sorts, we can still make mistakes. And you can start to see when you see new information such as this in your short-term memory. When I quiz you working memory, it's 6. And Emma had a laugh. She's seen it before, but she couldn't remember the answer. So long-term memory, but she was probably in implicit memory where it's subconscious and she can't recall it accurately. Okay, does that make sense? Stickability is something I've done on my 5-minute lesson plans. If you're not familiar with those, I'm just going to signpost the link here on my site, 5-minute plan. It's on a what, why, how methodology, the why being the stickability moment about making content stick. There's a digital version, you get a month free this month while you're at home to play around with it. All the titles are editable. There's 35 other versions in here for research, for behavior, for assemblies, every aspect of school life. But stickability is about making content stick. So in my Mark Plan Teach book, I've talked about space in practice. So I draw the 10p coin. Next week, we talk about 10 pence and money and whatever else, or circumference of the coin. In a month's time, we retrieve it, we practice. Interleaving is mixing the content between your schema work, different topics, okay, to help long-term memory over time rather than do this unit first, finish, test, move on to a new unit. Are we familiar with Ebbinghaus, everybody?
Yeah.
Anybody not? Okay, so if you just go to Google, just Ebbinghaus forgetting curve. There's loads of graphics on there. It talks a bit more. I mean, I wouldn't follow the numbers to explicit form. You've got loads of research articles there, but on the images, you'll just get some simple graphics. You know, I wouldn't believe these numbers for a minute, but essentially just showing when you've learned something new, within a day, you're going to forget at least 90% of the content. There's other examples here. So, but the principle is, if you don't revisit the content, you're going to forget it. So if I think back to this webinar, if you don't revisit these slides or this video recording, you're going to forget everything that I've talked to you about memory. Okay, and I would probably make a note in your diary to come back to it in a month's time or in September when we're back in schools. And if you then share it with someone else, there's lots of saying, if you could teach it to someone else, you know it. I would say I'm still at an intermediate level with knowledge, but that's something to just consider. If you explain things, it improves your retention, your retrieval. So best thing is to share it with other people to learn more. So there's great more in the Learning Scientists. Stuff in the book, I'll give you a cartoon to help. Now, direct instruction, I talked earlier about too much information, how you present information. Turn to page 2, read these 3 questions, kids. Working memory gets limited. This is a great tool for direct instruction. 1 or 2 of you may have seen it before on my slides. Materials, so a mint analogy, in or out of seats, noise level and time. So how I would present information to children, say, right, hands down, I'm going to ask anybody, but in this case, I'm going to say this. M for materials. Right, kids, you need an A3 piece of paper, a pencil, a ruler, and this pink worksheet. You're going to be out of your seats, in or out of your seats, move around the classroom, look at the displays. Quiet conversation with your partner, fill in the worksheet. You've got 7 minutes of time. I'll give you 1 minute warning, off you go. If I say any questions, Anthony, you say, sir, did you see the football last night? Emma says, sir, I've broken my ruler and my pencil, can you give me a spare one? And then we lose clarity. So what I've got to assure is hands down, go through the instructions, off you go, and then I come and monitor behaviour management and questions around the room. So that type of technique may support you with that example where I talked about cognitive load theory or poor working memory, where kids can't remember what you've told them to do. And sometimes we get kids to do whiteboards, thumbs up, thumbs down, or repeat back to your partner, did you understand the instruction, just to check. There's loads of little techniques like that that are really valuable and work. And finishing off, there's a cartoon there with Mark Plan Teach, just to signpost all the ideas. You can get half of these on my website anyway, but that's just a cartoon with all the kind of teaching techniques for marking and assessment, for lesson planning, and for teaching. The mint analogy is this one here: be explicit about your learning and outcomes, and that helps with kids' working memory, so to speak. So there's a hyperlink there. If you type that in, you can download that. And I'll finish off with this in my new book. That picture of the bicycle is from my publishers, Hannah, who's the editor. I asked her to draw. She cycles to work every day in London, obviously not at the moment, but she cycles to work, and I asked her to draw a picture of her bike from her memory, even though she cycles and uses her bike every day. I then showed her a picture of her bike, and that's her second drawing underneath. And you can see her memory was poor and her drawing ability or confidence was low. And the emotional response was that she would laugh about her drawing, when actually supported, if I go back to that image of the bear, if I showed her a picture of the bear and a picture of the text describing a bike, I'm supporting her working memory. And if I do it on a retrieval, last month, last week, last lesson, I build up to a point where she could draw that bicycle that accurate without relying on her episodic memory, which is more unreliable based on emotions and experiences. So I think that's it. I've gone slightly over time, so I apologise, but maybe give you a little insight. I'm going to record the whole video has been recorded, so I'm going to send that to you in about half an hour, and all the slides.